session. It's gonna be long.
Your mic's
The what?
working?
You know what we're doing in executive session?
I thought it'd be nice to share how much you say. Check your mic.
I know what I hope, but
It's not on. I am on?
yeah.
No, you can just hear me. That's not my mic. That's me, Josh. Now, can you hear me? No, it's not on.
We didn't participate,
Not that I need one, but you know,
so we took advantage of it.
would still be nice.
More than 9,000.
Is the power on?
I don't know.
I don't know where they got this.
Is there a power button on here?
You know,
Does it look like that?
There's a green light.
Oh yeah, you're on.
Again, there I am.
There you
Hello.
Our 6 buses.
Hello.
Test.
My name is Elder Price.
Right, you got it.
They all gave me paper. I emailed everybody and asked for no paper.
Okay, at this time, if we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First of all, I want to apologize. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather this evening, so I do apologize, but I will try and be as loud and clear as possible here. We would like to take a moment of silence as our hearts go out to the Tusky Valley students, staff, and larger community on their unimaginable and devastating loss of 6 individuals, 3 students, a teacher, and 2 chaperones who lost their lives way too soon in an accident on their way to the OSBA Capitol Conference in Columbus. We want to let them know that they are certainly in our thoughts during this difficult time. So at this time, we will have a moment of silence to show our love and support. Thank you.
Okay, correspondence this evening?
Yes, we did have a variety of communications that were received and either addressed or directed to the appropriate personnel to address. One in particular that I wanted to share because it was discussed at last month's meeting in regards to the library, and they were going to have an agreement on this month's agenda. I did receive a correspondence from them in the interim since our last meeting that basically stated that they had some discussion with the Geneva City Zoning Department, and it was determined that a formal agreement for the after-hours parking was unnecessary. So they wanted to extend their appreciation to the Board of Education for being open to discussing such an agreement. But it is not something that's needed at this time.
Thank you. Did you have any correspondence?
No.
Okay. Okay, a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon,
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz,
Yes.
and Mr. Arndt.
Yes.
A motion for the treasurer's financial report.
So moved. Second.
Discussion?
I just wanted to note that included in the revenues in October were the Spire pilot payment. I meant to bring up at the last meeting of $197,208 received at the beginning of October. And this month so far, not yet reflected in the financial report. We received the insurance claim payment on the damaged bus number 8, which was $79,975, and also our $2,000 from Rush Bus Center for the bus number 29 trade. So we're still waiting to get posted on the public auction surplus website. The 6 new buses, the buses replaced with the 6 new buses, and then arrange as to whether we would trade in those buses or sell them via auction.
Roll call?
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon?
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes.
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
And Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
A motion to approve the invoices.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Milliken Dixon?
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes.
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
And Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
Okay, we have our informational items and the current investments. Was there any comments on that? No? Okay. The legislative report?
Yes. I apologize in advance. It is quite lengthy. Our representatives have been busy. So, in the Ohio House, the House passed HB 187. The bill would modify, excuse me. The other part is I'm recovering from COVID. The bill would modify the procedures used by the tax commissioner to conduct property tax sales assessment ratio studies. The bill now heads to the Senate. The House also unanimously passed HB 74. The bill would establish a plan to migrate the state's information technology systems to the state's computer center and cloud environment and establish a cybersecurity and fraud advisory board. This bill also now heads to the Senate. The Senate passed SB 113, which prohibits a person who fails to comply with the military selective service system from holding a public office or employment with the state. The bill now heads to the House. The House Primary and Secondary Education Committee amended and then passed HB 250, which revises the Military Enlistment Diploma Seal. The amendment renames the Military Enlistment Seal to the Military Seal, since the legislation makes students entering the U.S. military academies or ROTC programs on scholarship eligible for the seal. The committee introduced a substitute version of HB 214, excuse me, which would require each public school to adopt a policy regarding certain expectations related to the performance of staff member professional duties. The substitute bill does several things. It eliminates terms opine about and social action from the legislation, removes the requirement that school districts make a declaration that it expects all professional staff members to maintain high standards with respect to coworker relationships and in the performance of the staff members' professional duties. It prohibits a school district from using statements of commitment to specific beliefs, affiliations, ideals, or principles concerning political movements or ideology as a part of the academic evaluation of students. It states that nothing in the bill requires school districts to make protected legal communications or guidance publicly available. The committee also accepted a substitute version of HB 206, which would permit a school district to establish a policy that authorizes the superintendent to expel a student from a public school for actions that endanger the health and safety of other students or school employees. The substitute bill now requires a superintendent to consult with a multidisciplinary team when making student reinstatement determinations. Excuse me. It defines sufficient rehabilitation and severe and imminent danger. It clarifies what professionals are qualified to provide mental health assessments for suspended students. It shifts the cost of such assessments from students' families to the schools and the districts. It extends the deadline, excuse me. It extends the deadline for establishing a continuing education plan for a suspended student from 5 to 15 days. It requires a student's individualized education program team to be included in the development of the continuing education plan. The committee passed HB 147, sponsored by our own Sarah Arthur, which would make changes to teacher licensure revocation, teacher hiring practices, and conduct unbecoming to the teaching profession. The Senate Education Committee heard sponsor testimony on SB 162, which would require public schools to provide certain academic intervention services to each student who demonstrates a limited level in math and/or ELA. The committee also heard sponsor testimony on SB 168. This bill would make the following changes. It would permit a school district to renew its exemption from certain statutory requirements related to every 3 years rather than one 3-year term only, and requires the Department of Workforce and Education to notify districts that are eligible about this exemption. It permits school districts to develop and use their own frameworks for teacher evaluation instead of using the framework developed by the previous Ohio Board of Education. It modifies license or certificate qualifications for senior or lead professional educators, holders of a professional pupil services license, holders of professional administrator or alternative superintendent license, and non-teachers employed as teachers. It eliminates seniority as a preference when making reductions in non-teaching staff positions. It changes certain professional development requirements related to dyslexia training and the coordination of continuing education and professional development. It eliminates a requirement that districts enter supplemental contracts with teachers assigned to teach classes outside the normal school day. It permits a school district to apply for a waiver from dyslexia screening requirements if the district proves that a student previously received a dyslexia screening in the prior school year. It clarifies that a school district is not required to hold a separate individual public hearing on a proposed school calendar, but that the calendar may be addressed as part of another public hearing or meeting. It removes several policies and programs from the laws governing the Department of Workforce and Education and the State Board of Education that are obsolete. The Senate Ways and Means Committee held a 4th hearing on SB 183, which would temporarily modify the method for valuing farmland and other real property for tax purposes. The Senate Health Committee heard sponsor testimony on HB 147, which would require the placement of automated external defibrillators in each public and chartered non-public school and each public recreational facility. The bill would also require the Ohio Department of Health to develop a model emergency action plan for the use of AEDs. The House Finance Committee held a 3rd hearing on HB 164, which establishes the Foster to College Scholarship Program. The bill requires the Department of Education to hire a full-time foster care liaison and make an appropriation for the Foster to College Scholarship Program. The House Criminal Justice Committee held a 3rd hearing on HB 139, which would increase the penalties for assault if the victim is acting as a sports official or the assault is committed in retaliation for the victim's actions as a sporting official. The Senate Veterans and Public Safety Committee amended and passed SB 113, which prohibits a person who fails to comply with military selective service system from holding a public office or employment with the state. The amendment exempts from the bill elected or appointed officers created through the Ohio Constitution. The House Higher Education Committee held a 3rd hearing on HB 183 regarding single-sex bathroom access in primary and secondary schools and in institutions of higher education. The House Criminal Justice Committee passed HB 139, which would increase the penalties for assault. Oh, I did that already. I apologize. Oh, I'm sorry, the Senate and the House, that's one of, I think, 3 that the Senate and House have passed similar bills, and so now their job is going to be to combine them and make sure that we just have one law that goes into effect. The committee amended SB 17, which required the state board, well, now the DEW, to update the standards and model curriculum for financial literacy and entrepreneurship in grades 9 through 12 to include free market capitalism content. So these two amendments do the following. They allow the students to fulfill the financial literacy high school graduation requirement by completing advanced placement courses in microeconomics or in macroeconomics. And it exempts math teachers from a required license validation needed to teach financial literacy. House Transportation Committee held a second hearing on HB 279 that would require seatbelts. That's the seatbelt one on buses. And actually, since the accident the other day, there's been more debate about this. Those children, I don't believe, were restrained in the accident, and so that has sparked more of this debate about whether or not school buses should have seatbelts. A few new bills have been introduced. HB 310 regards the purchases of military service credit by state teachers' retirement system members. HB 311 prohibits differing ticket prices for online and cash school-affiliated events and requires a student ticket to be less than an adult price ticket. HB 312 establishes the Regional Partnerships Program and makes an appropriation for that. SB 181 prohibits differing ticket prices. I did that one already, I apologize.
Senate bill.
That's right, that's one of the three, that there are two. There's a House bill and a Senate bill doing essentially the same thing. Foster to college, again, the Senate did also. The State Board of Education, I wrote this, I think, before the thing came down about the DEW. Anyway, now it's officially called DEW, right? The lawsuit's over, and DEW won, and so that's what we have from now on. So they met this week. The State Board of Education met last week after it was previously announced that the board president, Paul LaRue, that the board would not meet until more details regarding the 7 members of the lawsuit about the DEW were ironed out. So since the lawsuit, I guess there's some issues within the State Board of Education they've got to iron out to help with that transition. So they conducted business even though they didn't live stream it. The members, they did an 18 question questionnaire for all the members who were not present. They're going to complete it and return it to the board before the next meeting. And the big questions were, number one, why weren't State Board of Education members consulted before postponing the meeting? Number two, did the board leadership advise the ODE staff not to attend and support this meeting? And if so, why? Was there a boycott situation because of the transfer to DEW? And then who issued the directive that the Ohio Channel not record and make the October 10th meeting of the State Board of Education, and by what authority? So what's happening is there's still some conflict there, even though the lawsuit was in the favor of Governor DeWine and his DEW, there's still a lot of angst around the transition. So again, I've listed your public officials, all the way from our Sarah Fowler up to President Biden, so please contact them if you have any questions or concerns or want them to represent you in any kind of certain way. Thank you.
Thank you. The ATEC report?
Yes. The governor came through. ATEC received word about 10 days ago that we were awarded $6,033,222.
Yeah.
Yes, it was ATEC's portion of the $200 million allocated by the state for career tech expansion. There were 59 proposals submitted, of which 35 were selected for funding. These funds will be used to enable improvements to the public safety fields. Currently, students take criminal justice in their junior year and firefighting EMT pathway during their senior. With the new program, ATEC students can enroll in a new 2-year program in either pathway. This enables a student to gain more in-depth knowledge and practical experience in the public safety fields. In a related issue, the health department conducted a simulated emergency at ATEC. It was a distribution of medications to those who were exposed to anthrax. In the debriefing, the health department stated that they were very pleased with the student participation as well as the use of the facility. We're looking forward to future partnerships with them. Also in the health field, members of the healthcare department at Kent State met with ATEC to discuss connecting select ATEC programs with KSU programs. This would not replace our RN, LPN programs, but it would enhance them. During the meeting, we were treated to a report from some of our female students who attended a program called She Dig. It was organized by the Ohio Operating Engineers at their training center in Richfield. They were allowed to operate heavy equipment such as skid steers, backhoes, and cranes under the guidance of experienced professionals. From what we could see, the ladies had a great day and loved the experience, and we're probably going to see some more female operating engineers out there. The November ATEC newsletter is out, and there were 2 featured students, both from Geneva. Calvin Yeager is in the Power Sports and Outdoor Equipment program, and Penelope Silverman is in the Horticulture, Landscaping, and Parks Management program. Congratulations to both of them. The next meeting will be this coming Monday, November 20th. That's it.
Thank you.
It's at 9 in the morning, right, Tyler?
10.
10, thank you. Where are we going? Oh, sorry, Eagles.
Okay.
Sorry about it.
Again, I apologize, I am under the weather, so all of the people that we do call up here this evening, I'm not going to shake your hand because I certainly don't want to spread any germs. Mr. Lillie will be up here shaking hands on my behalf to congratulate you. Soaring Above was created last year to honor and recognize individuals that support our district in outstanding ways. From alumni to current staff and extending to community members that support the education of our students, we have many invaluable supporters who go above and beyond to keep our district strong. We will be recognizing 2 outstanding supporters each year and share their stories in our buildings and with the community at large. Our goal is to shine a light on those who have helped to positively impact our district and have served as great role models for our students. We will announce and highlight these individuals at a board meeting and present them or their family with a poster, and a second one will be hung in the main hall here in the high school to be displayed so that families along with visitors can read more about these outstanding individuals. Last spring, if you recall, our first recipient was Mark Brace. This evening, I would like to share a little bit about our second recipient before having him come up here. Tonight's recipient, Vince Gildone, is the administrator of the Northwest Ambulance District, also known as NAD. Vince has spent 44 years there serving our community. He was also the battalion chief at Conneaut Station 3 for over 25 years. In 2016, Mr. Gildone was named Chamber of Commerce Citizen of the Year. When talking with others, the repeated description of him is that he is not afraid to give his opinion, he is a problem solver, and he is very kind-hearted and generous. An addition I would make to this is that he is extremely caring and invested in our students, staff, and community. I say this as Vince sits on both of our safety committee as well as our threat assessment team. He always asks very thoughtful questions, provides his opinion, and seeks to learn when he doesn't know something. He has been a huge asset to both of these teams and brings a unique perspective. I know everyone here is very appreciative of his time, dedications, and efforts, not only for our students and staff, but the larger community. I have been told numerous stories in which he has personally contributed to help others when he hears that they are in need. For reasons such as these, we want to recognize him this evening as our Soaring Above recipient. So thank you, Vince, for all you have done and continue to do for our district and our community. At this time, if you wouldn't mind coming up here, we would like to present you with the Soaring Above Award.
couldn't do this, couldn't do what I do here if it wasn't for a board that cooperates and believes in the same things that I believe in. We have a responsibility for all of your buildings, so it's not a responsibility that you aren't familiar with since you're responsible for all of them. That's a lot of potential injuries, illnesses, and you know, bad things that could happen. That's why we do all the safety training that we do, and we have the investment that we have in that. And plus, you know, there are kids, our schools, our teachers, our administrators. So we want to help. We want to keep doing it. I don't do it alone. I think that's important to know. I'm getting a really nice award, but I couldn't do it without my own staff and the cooperation of my board. So thank you, and thank you.
Moving on this evening, we are going to continue with our years of service recognition. Last month, we started recognizing our staff for their years of service and dedication to the district. And in doing so, we honored those with at least 10 years of service last month. This evening, we will celebrate those who have at least 15 years of service. Therefore, at this time, I would like to call up Mrs. Brzenko, as we'll be starting with the staff at GPS. So please help us recognize the individuals when they are called, who will be presented with a certificate and a token of our appreciation.
Good evening. I would like to first congratulate Kristen Berg. Thank you. Come on down. Next, we have Elizabeth Carrier, who could not be here tonight. Give her a round of applause. Nikki Charo, who also could not be here. Her children are sick. Mary Dudick. Justin Kopasak. And Maureen Rankin. Thank you. Mrs. Doherty.
First off, I'd like to thank all of our dedicated teachers. This is fabulous, 15 years. Our first one that I do want to recognize is Mrs. Bridget Bordeaux. I don't know if she's here tonight or not. Also, Teresa Grimmett. She's been a wonderful custodian for us, so congratulations to her. And Miss Tammy Ritchie, my right-hand man. And last but not least, Mrs. Lisa Stoll. I think she's here. Is she here? Come on down, Lisa. We're looking forward to our winter performances. She's been busy.
Mr. Markajon.
Hello, everybody. For Ostenburg, with 15 years of service, between 15 and 19 years of service, Tiffany Capo, Bobby Joe Dilworth, Angela Knapp, Jane Noble, Deborah Waring, and we share Lisa Stowell, but Mrs. Doherty stole the thunder. I just wanted to say your name, that's all.
She's the music teacher, Todd, so she goes.
Mr. Poland?
Good evening. It's my pleasure to introduce 15 to 19-year-old candidates. Sorry.
19-year-old?
15 to 19. Did I say that? Sorry. Been in service for 15 to 19 years in Geneva schools, and they're unable to attend tonight. We have Rebecca Pierce, Tessa Plavkin, and Tammy Sabin. Thank you.
Mr. King?
Everybody else got to do it now. It just seems like the thing you're supposed to do, I guess. I don't know. All right, we have quite a few, but apparently, I apologize. Many of them are coaching and or doing other things this evening. So I would definitely like to share their names because many of these folks do just an incredible job, and all of them are just very dedicated to our students. Starting off with Stella Andrasis, Wendy Booth, Justin Cafaro, Deborah Cardeman, Ann Craig, Christopher Clemens, Jennifer Crossley, Ray Dose, Michelle Mather, Stacy Nestor-Pranko, and last but not least, Don Chimsky. So if I just keep saying names, you keep clapping. That's how you do it right there. And unfortunately, Mr. Riley was feeling under the weather, so I'm going to go ahead and share our two district names as well, who contribute greatly to the operation of the district for all of our students. On behalf of the district, Shar Leonard and Mrs. Amy Richmond.
Who's first? I never know the order. Do you know the order? I know, but she has a system. I have yet to figure it out. Yeah.
Moving on to our administrative reports, Mr. Markajon.
on my way down here, I got the keep it under 2 minutes speech 3 times. So we will see what we can do.
Your warnings were longer than the speech allowance.
I know. I'm sorry. A whole bunch of pictures in the packet for the board tonight. The flexible seating has just come more and more into play as the students are feeling more comfortable with it. So there's a number of pictures about the flexible seating. A couple of things that I noticed in the observations that I've been doing out in the classrooms. Mrs. Bucci had a short group activity where the students were brainstorming, and so she put them in their teams and they went off, and they all found their own little space in the classroom where they seemed to feel really comfortable. It involved different types of seating, and they did an amazing job taking turns, having some conversation and brainstorming together on various ideas. On the other side of that, as I go into the classrooms, typically they have like a seat that might be able to fit somebody of my distinguished size. However, when I went into one of the second grade classrooms, all they had were the wobble stools. So I took my notes sitting on the wobble stool, trying to go ahead and get used to that movement. It was quite an experience, to say the least. However, as I looked around, the students absolutely were able to burn off a little bit of energy on those, or it just seemed to soothe some of the students. So the flexible seating has been a big plus at Ostenburg. Our kindergartners amaze me in all of the really cool stuff that they get into. Like for Grape Jamboree, they were tie-dyeing shirts and working together on smashing grapes. But as I was out doing my morning duty, watching the students come in, some had these nets of butterflies that showing the metamorphosis process of going through from a caterpillar all the way to a butterfly. And what these students understand about that just blows my mind as 5 and 6 year olds. And our kindergarten teachers are just awesome that they are able to go ahead and bring these sort of activities to our kids and let them feel like they have a hands-on activity to see how things work in nature. So really, really neat what our kindergarten class is doing. And finally, I think all of the schools celebrated Veterans Day, many on different days because we were kind of working with Mrs. Stowell's schedule. So I think Osterberg had one of the earlier ones. I think we celebrated ours on the 8th of November. But I haven't been down to an elementary school to see a veterans program, a Veterans Day program in many, many, many years. And I was just blown away with how amazing our kids were. They paid attention. Even the preschool kids, it was about a 45, 50-minute presentation, and they stayed focused the whole time. I was just amazed. They honored exactly, actually, 70 veterans. Ostenburg only has around 225, 230 students, and with that, we honored 70 veterans, and we were able to honor somebody from each and every one of the branches of the military, including Space Force. And just as a note, and I absolutely had no idea that they were going to do this, and in the after fact, I wish I would have maybe made a bigger deal about it, but I truly just didn't know. And actually, there's one more thing after that, too. Sorry. they sang happy birthday to one of our veterans that were there. And the veteran was seated, and he was just like 10 feet away from me. And he was wearing a hat, and the hat was a World War II veteran. So we had a World War II veteran celebrating his birthday that all of the students at Ostenburg sang happy birthday to him, and I believe it was his 98th birthday. Wow. But what an opportunity and what a thought for everybody to witness a World War II veteran in our elementary school and being able to go ahead and honor him. The final piece on Veterans Day, Board, you have a picture of this. Sergeant Wendt, who is a father. By the way, that service, the World War II veteran, he is a great-great-grandfather of one of our kindergartners. But our guest speaker was Sergeant Wendt, who is a father of one of our second graders, and he did a phenomenal job keeping everybody occupied, busy, and enthralled with what was going on. He did possibly make maybe a rookie teaching mistake when he asked the group of 200 and some students, now I just want about 10 or 12 of you to volunteer to come up and show us how to do push-ups. And he did not say, well, okay, we'll take you two and we'll take you two. No, he just said, about 10 or 12 of you come on up. So in the picture that you guys have, there are over 50 students that came up to go ahead and show everybody how to do push-ups. So, and my final thing has absolutely nothing to do except it is my wife's 40th birthday tonight. So happy birthday to her. I asked what she wanted to do tonight, and she said, I want a 5-year forecast from Kevin Lillie. What else would you want to do on your birthday?
Happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
You're not supposed to say how old, though.
Yeah.
Make him sleep on the couch.
Yesterday was her last day at 39. Is that better?
No, it's not.
I'm sorry. Mrs. Porcello.
Mr. Markajon used my time, so I'm going to keep this really short and sweet. On my update, you'll see numbers. I compared last year's numbers to this year's numbers for students on IEPs, broke down each of the categories, and then total at the bottom. You guys can enjoy those numbers. We did receive on October 24th the special education rating from the state of Ohio. Much like last year, the rating was 24 points out of 24 points. However, as everything else with the state of Ohio, these were actually reporting from the 21-22 school year.
Still
So,
take it.
A little bit behind, but that's okay. The special ed rating looks at things like disproportionality, timely evaluations, secondary transitions, timely corrections of noncompliance, which we had none, timely and accurate data, and IDA audit findings. And to wrap it up, 504s versus IEPs. There's, I don't know if I want to say confusion, but just questions that always revolve around the difference between a 504 and an IEP. The main difference is that a 504 plan modifies a student's regular education program in a regular education setting. The plan is monitored by classroom teachers. A student on an IEP is part of IDEA, and they receive special education services, typically in a special education setting. And the IEP program, what's laid out in the IEP program, are delivered and monitored by additional staff, which are intervention specialists, speech therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, etc. And because 504s are not special education documents, but rather general education documents, intervention specialists are not writing them. They are able to be part of the team that works on them for things such as, and I only have a couple examples in my write-up, but things such as providing small group for testing. We're already providing it as intervention specialists as long as we stay below the number for small group and a student needs a small group removed from a classroom, there's no reason intervention specialists can't be part of that. Or potentially a student that needs a sensory space or a cool down space. A lot of times those are associated with intervention specialists as well. They monitor those spaces. So those would be times where intervention specialists would play a part in them. Not an exhaustive list, but that's the difference, the main difference between those two documents.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly, that's helpful.
Mr. King?
And quick. Good job. King, that's cool.
Okay. Go as quick as we can here. So, starting off real quick, we've been very busy musically, as always, and the picture there is of the OMEA District 5 Honors Choir that several high school and middle school musicians were a part of. Also, the GIs have been incredibly busy. They had the Perry Show, the choir festival. There was the jazz potpourri, or potpourri, they called it this evening, so they have been incredibly busy. The band, as we saw, for many Friday nights, many parades, and of course the playoff season, did a wonderful job throughout the fall season. Next up on your update, we are fortunate enough to host the CVC Cheer Showcase. This is an annual event the CVC puts on since I was president of the CVC. We had over 170 cheerleaders in the gym from all the various CVC schools, and according to Geneva staff that were there helping out, it was the most packed that our gym has ever been. So pretty cool, just lots of great energy for that event. And again, on the second page, just a real quick congratulations. You know, many of our teams did incredibly well. Just pinpointing or spotlighting football, of course. They did incredibly well with a 10-2 season. Unfortunately, of course, losing to Chardon in the second round of the playoffs. Chardon did go on and handle Aurora remarkably well this last week. So Chardon was definitely a team to beat, and we played every single play the best we could against them. So a lot of credit to our football team. Just this past weekend, Radium Girls was performed right here by our own thespians, directed by Ms. Robin Christopher. They did an amazing job telling a very important and interesting part of American history of literally young ladies who at work were using radioactive paint, painting watch dials, and how it affected them in their lives and the struggle that they went through by doing that. You know, in history, you may have learned, like, the Mad Hatter, they went mad because of working with mercury. These girls were working with radium. So that's how their disabilities came about, and that's what the play is about.
And eating it. They were licking their paintbrushes,
Yes.
which is,
Well, they were told that their lines would be better to keep it. Yep.
yep.
I chew my pencil, it doesn't help. So for many of our fans, we had a great, not March 14th Pie Day, but we did have another Pie Day, which was a fundraiser for our choir folks that are going to Rome, Italy here coming up. And I put the various pictures in there. Thank you to Superintendent Treharn, President Ortiz for being a part of that, myself, Mr. Chenoweth, Mrs. Unsinger. The last count I got was we raised about $700, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
They said Mr. Chenoweth raised $690 and the rest of us came in short, but he does the discipline, so that's probably why. Just kidding, just kidding. For our Veterans Day, we did recognize, of course, our own Mrs. Gillette, who is our school nurse. Interestingly enough, in many of the schools I've been at, you know, we'll have several veterans or no veterans. She is the one veteran that we do have on staff here, but Veterans Day was felt throughout the building. Various teachers, of course, were taught lessons regarding Veterans Day, veteran service, etc. Again, putting a spotlight on Mrs. Wilson's class for Principles of Democracy. She had a veteran speaker in each one of her classes. Again, spotlighting two of them that were pictured in the update. Captain Ray Patterson and Corporal Madeline Ellswick, who joined us for that day, sharing their experiences. Keeping in the military theme, the Ashtabula County Young Marines, spearheaded by Carly Sill, led our Red Ribbon Week celebrations, and you can see a picture of the banner that Carly and the Young Marines put together for us, and that many, many, many of our students signed in their pledge to be drug-free, which is awesome. Staying with the military thread, if you will, we have already started our planning because Geneva High School will be hosting the Marines enlistment ceremony coming up in the spring. The director of the Veteran Services Commission will be coming out, ironically, on Pearl Harbor Day for us to do a walk of the building. More than likely, we'll probably do it in the auditorium, but he did ask to see the main gym just for space, size, setting, etc., so that we can begin our planning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Doherty?
Thank you. At Cork, we have gone from not Thanksgiving, Halloween activities to voting and election, and then now we're rounding out with all of our Thanksgiving activities. So a lot going on, and we've been working our PTO very hard between a couple of things that we've been doing as well. They like to stay busy. But the first thing I have on here, speaking of Halloween, Mrs. Limpert, who is our resource room teacher interventionist, she has multi-needs and multi-grade level students in her class, so it's always a challenge to find activities for all of them. And so she did do a little experiment with them with candy corn. And I did put that on here, how they did take notes on it. They dissolved candy corn in water, oil, and vinegar, and then they did record their observations. So in case you wanted to know, the water turned orange, dissolved the candy corn, and broke the glaze covering into small pieces. The vinegar turned orange, dissolved the candy corn, and the glaze covering was left. So, I wonder what that's made out of. And then in vegetable oil, it did nothing. So, other than the kids said there's oil on them. So, she did a really good job with that. So, I do like to see those things. I love being in that classroom. So.
Yes, but was the taste improved in it?
They didn't. Hopefully they didn't taste it. But anyway, they enjoyed it. Also with Halloween, we have one party down in the books. We have our first Halloween party, and we do a parade outside, and we do invite parents if they want to come and see their child. And each year, the crowd is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, so it's so nice to see, and we've been lucky the past couple of years to have a beautiful day. So there were so many people out there because not everybody can volunteer for the party. So at least they could come in and they could see all the costumes. And Barbie was there. So just so you know, very famous people come to Cork Elementary. So anyway, the kids were fabulous. They had fun. And then our PTO had our very first trunk or treat, a beautiful night, October 27th. I put originally November in there, but Dr. Treharn corrected me on that, thank goodness. But we had a great turnout. It was fun. There was food. The kids were all, I've never been to one, so my kids are so old, we don't know what trunk or treat is. But they decorated. It was just really fabulous. And I only got in trouble once because I was telling the kids to keep going back up and back to get more candy. But the trunk that went out of the treats the fastest was Robinson's Apple Barn, they were handing out apples. And it was kind of cute. The kids had all their candy, but they're all eating an apple. So it was fun. It was really fun. I was just so glad the weather worked with us as well. And then our kindergarten teachers, they're always busy, busy, busy. And with elections, they do like to every year have an election. And it's between Oreo cookies and chocolate chips. And last year's class voted for the Oreo, and this year's classes did as well. So that Oreo is really winning out over chocolate chips. So they did do that. They went over all the vocabulary that goes along with elections. And then they worked on their disguising a turkey, trying to get parents involved. The students and their parents, had to disguise a turkey because you don't want the turkey to get eaten for Thanksgiving. And there is a picture of one. It's hard to hold this microphone. I did want to share with you. It said, he's dressed up as a little ninja. I'm not a turkey. I'm a ninja turtle named, I can't read it. Mikey. Do not try and eat me, as you won't like me. On Thanksgiving, try a slice of pizza or 3. Then you can be a pizza-loving ninja like me. So it's really cute.
That's awesome.
They do. All of our teachers work so hard. So that's always fun. I love walking up and down the halls and reading all of the things that they do. First grade's busy continuing with our social emotional learning. Unfortunately, with my beginning of the year, we haven't started our families yet, but we are going to be doing that. It's just pushed us way back, but they do use, I wanted to share a website, Books, which is free. Correct, Mrs. Schrader? It's free. So they can go on there and read, they can put the books up on their smart boards, and it's really nice to get that social emotional learning in there. And they do it during their snack time, so the kids are snacking and watching, and then they have some discussions. And then they're gonna work on turkey disguises as well. Mrs. Simmons' art class has been making 3D pumpkin pies, and third grade made wearable buttons that they designed themselves after learning about artist Keith Haring. She really teaches the kids about artists and their contributions, so it is nice to see her do those activities. And then Mrs. Stowell, if you're still here, she did put on a wonderful Veterans Day program. Just like everyone else said, it was wonderful having everybody there, seeing their information up on the screen. But my favorite thing is all of us saying America the Beautiful toward the end. They just belted out like there's no tomorrow. So it's just listening to everybody sing it together, and the kids were really loud and into it and singing. It's just something magical. She does a lot of work on that, so thank you for that. Okay, what else do I have here? Am I over my 2 minutes?
No.
And going back to elections, I'll end it with this. We did have our student council officers. There was an election. They had to get up and give speeches to the student body, grades 3 through 5, which is very nerve-wracking for them. But the results are in. Our secretary is Miss Grace Bonner, our treasurer, Gil Holodniak, and Vice President Alexis Rowe, President Landon Capella. So they're going to be there representing all of our students. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Brzenko, and she will also be giving Mr. Riley's report this evening because unfortunately he is under the weather as well.
Okay, I will start with GPS. Mrs. Fisher was kind enough to call me and asked me if I would love to have a visitor in my building, and I said, okay, who is it? And she said it was Michael Saul. So Michael Saul, he came to visit grades 4 and 5 on November 8th, and he gave a presentation on Spencerian script and American cursive handwriting. Students were able to practice the handwriting and show Mr. Saul their work, and he was even so kind as to autograph some for him. Mr. Saul also gave a copy of his news book, The Art of Cursive Penmanship, along with a copy for our building. So for me and for the building, he gave them out. I have a picture in here of Mr. Saul and myself in front of Mr. Spencer there at GPS.
That's cool.
And on the next page, you will see Mr. Saul with Mr. Kopasak. I am telling you that these people are Spencerian best friends forever. Mr. Kopasak dressed up with, like, identical to Mr. Saul. He knew exactly what he was going to wear, a bow tie, a vest. They were, like, inseparable the whole entire time. And then on the bottom is a student who was showing his work to Mr. Saul, and he actually got it signed. So it was pretty exciting to have him. He kept going out of the building, wanted me to go out of the building, come back in the building so I could see his writing that's above the entranceway. So it was pretty exciting. So thank you, Mrs. Fisher, for letting me know he was in town. As you can see, he did the different drawings of my name on there, so I could have something. No, it did not cost $8. There's an $8 on there. A student asked how much the ink was that he uses for this writing, and he said $8, so he wrote it down, and so everybody thought I had to pay $8 to have him do all this stuff for me. It's not
If
true.
I could just add one thing.
Sure.
Michael Sull is a world-class penman. There are only 12 of them in the world that have met the qualifications that he has met. He was taught by a man who was it goes back, but his teacher was taught by the grandson of Platt R. Spencer. Wow. So it's a continuing line of instruction to Michael. And he's 75 years old now, and he is loving every minute of it, but he does travel all over the world to teach Spencerian writing, even to people in Russia and Japan that don't even have our alphabet. So it was a real honor to have him. He comes to Geneva every year because he honors the birthplace of Spencer.
And he did reach out to Mrs. Fisher and tell him how well behaved the students were and how excited he was to see excitement in the students' eyes as they were trying to do this fancy stuff. So I want to thank him again. It was a real pleasure to meet him. Also, ditto to Tony and Mrs. Doherty about Veterans Day. Mrs. Stowell, I can't say thank you enough. Every year it gets bigger and gets better, and you do so much work. There's slideshow presentations. She sends out the slips to the family. She collects the slips. She makes sure that all the pictures and all the information for each veteran is up on a slide. So thank you again for that. I can't say enough for that. I know that all three of us appreciate that, so thank you. Yes, that's true too, yes. She does have to announce the names, and sometimes she's like, yeah, there it is. So thank you, Mrs. Stowell. I did give you pictures of some of our veterans that did come for the day, and some of the letters. Our first graders wrote letters to veterans. We also made a lot of signs and different things, and we dropped that off at the VFW in Geneva so that they could also have them there as well. The posters are still hanging up. One surprise that a lot of students were like, oh, is when Mrs. Stowell's slide had Mrs. Myers, who is a 5th grade teacher, and her dad flew in for that. And the kids were awful surprised that she was a veteran. I didn't know she was a veteran also. So it was really nice to have, that part of that with the program. So again, thank you, Mrs. Stowell. Extended learning for November and December, we are focusing on kindergarten and in 1st grade. So far, we have 10 students that are signed up for that. So we are growing that program each month. We really want to focus on kindergarten because a lot of them do not have the preschool skills. So we want to make sure that we're hitting them at least every time we have a session. Also, Soaring Eagles and PBIS, Positive Behavior Intervention and Support. Each month, we choose students to represent each grade level, each teacher, and I put a copy of all of their pictures in there for you as well. Also, this month is Gratitude Month. So there is our theme that you can see when you walk in the entryway. It looks pretty nice. It's gratitude, and the students have a gratitude jar that they're going to start filling up when they go to library this week. Also, the Great Lakes Science Center outreach program came over on November 14th, and the assembly was regarding the magic of matter. And students learned and experimented how matter can change with one state into the other. So there's many pictures attached, so I hope you enjoy that. And I'd like to say thanks to our military men and women once again. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
All right, next up is Mr. Riley. Dr. Treharn mentioned he is sick as well. He has been conducting Title I meetings. On November 9th, he was at Austenburg. He has been at Cork and GPS during conference nights, and he will be going to the middle school tomorrow, hopefully. Hopefully, yeah. Also, he's been doing gifted parent meeting. There was November 13th at 6 o'clock. 7 families were in attendance. Some of the content of his presentation were the overview of the program, how many students overall by each building, the number of identification categories in academics, gifted service plans, different things like that, overall of classroom experience. So he had someone there that was able to talk on what was happening. They also do the characteristics of a gifted student, the portrait of a graduate overview, Professional development schedule is attached. We have narrowed that down so you can see what we are doing for certified and classified. Also, the spring test schedule was updated due to the solar eclipse. Calamity Day, we had to move one of the third grade testing, so during admin, we kind of hashed that out and came up with a plan. So that is attached as well. This year, we are adopting ELA 6 through 12 and Science 6 through 12, and the Curriculum and Education Standards Advising Committee, known as CESIC. All the representatives are listed there for you, who is on that committee. There are 3 newsletters that David Riley has been developing, and he has sent out to all the administrative team. And he says if any of the Board of Education members would like copies of those, to let him know, and he'd be glad to send you one. And also, he had appreciation and acknowledgement. Again, November is the month of gratitude. So he would like to thank the Board of Education, administration, staff, students, and families of our district. And he said, may the upcoming holiday season be wonderful for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Poland.
Thank you. It's good to speak to everybody tonight. Tony, you talked about the kindergarten with the grapes. Come down to lunchtime. You can see that anytime you want. Actually, they're really good. We don't have many messes in the cafeteria. We'll start off with a big thank you to our booster, or I call them a different name every time, the middle school parent group. They hosted our book fair. They sold over $4,000 in merchandise this time, so they did a really good job.
$4,000?
$4,000.
Wow.
They provided meals for the conference last week, and then tomorrow they're also providing meals. And the Fellowship of Christian Athletes provided snacks and drinks during conferences, went around each room, provided those. So I want to thank both of those groups. We had, Mr. King mentioned the honors choir in Youngstown. We had 9 students go there, practice and perform. They were excited. I was walking the hallways, and I heard, who's singing in the hallways? And went down by the music room, and these 9 students were out there practicing by themselves. And I stood there, they said, wait, you have to hear this other song, We Like It Better. So they started a different song on their own. They did a really good job. Our cross-country team went down to Columbus to participate in the OHSAA State Invitational on October 22nd. What's interesting about this one is they do not break the teams into divisions. They just mix the kids up and let them run. The boys had 4 races. The girls had 4 races. The boys got 30th out of 119 schools, and the girls got 31st out of 121 schools, which is really good considering we had 7 boys and 7 girls going down there. Taylor Scheinman, she got 4th in her individual race, which equated to 21st overall over 700 kids. So she got 21st place, which is really good. Let's see. Our kids, sixth graders went to the Kent State Ashtabula Career Discovery Day to learn about different careers that they can pursue. They really enjoyed that. Teachers said it was a great field trip. I think they went last year. This was the second time. They want to do it again next year. Mrs. Calusi did a lot of things for the armed forces. She did Field of Flags, which is through the Disabled American Veterans. Raise funds. The funds paid for the flags and also for donation towards the Field of Flags. And we got an email from a community member. I included it in there. If you don't mind, I'll read it because it was addressed to Mrs. Calusi. It said, I want to thank you so much for organizing this campaign. It was very special to my heart, not just to honor the veterans, but also to honor my husband, grandfather, brother-in-laws, cousins, and uncles who all served our country. Being from Geneva, it warms my heart to see the pride that you have for our veterans. My husband served in the United States Marine Corps from 81 to 07, and then worked for the Disabled American Veterans in Cleveland and in Huntington, West Virginia until 2021. The Field of Flags is such a wonderful program. I can't wait to see the flags. So it's nice to hear that from the community. Unexpected, but it was a great thing to hear. And then we did a slideshow. We emailed parents and asked them to send in pictures of their loved ones that served in the armed forces. So we had 60 or 70 pictures show up. And it was interesting. We played it during parent-teacher conferences and also during lunch, and the kids were actually watching the slideshow. There was no music, it was just pictures, and they were sitting there watching and looking to see when their family members would come up or who was involved. So it was very touching to watch that. So that's what's going on at the middle school.
The slideshow was amazing.
Oh,
She did a phenomenal job.
she did a great job.
Mhm.
Great job. Okay.
I have a few items to report on this evening as well. I had the pleasure of attending the Capitol Conference this week in Columbus and hearing a number of wonderful presentations ranging from legal updates and board meetings to bargaining and case law. When I went through the trade show, I stopped at the Ohio Schools Council booth, which we are a part of, and they provided me with a statement of savings report for our district. And for last year, by taking advantage of the programs that they offer through Ohio Schools Council, our district was able to save $326,579. So it's a pretty amazing program to take a part of. Emergency medical forms, I know I've been touching upon this each month. I'm thrilled to say that our numbers are getting lower. So we are down to only missing 201 forms. However, 157 of those are at the high school. So if you have a high school student, please get your emergency medical forms in. I can happily report that 2 of our buildings are at 100% completion. So congratulations to Austenburg and the middle school for having every single form in at this time. Just a reminder again about Stuff the Bus. That will run from November 20th to December 8th. And again, on December 9th, we will be at the Ashtabula Walmart from 10 to 2 for anyone who wants to make any last-minute donations. Keep in mind that everything collected for that stays in our county. The solar eclipse, for those of you that are parents, hopefully you got the all-call, but both the State of Ohio and the Ashtabula County Emergency Management Agencies have certainly worked hard with our public safety partners to make sure that our county is prepared for any type of emergency, but certainly the solar eclipse that will take place on April 8th, 2024. So we were advised that Ashtabula County should expect a temporary population increase of visitors as we are in the path of totality. So with that increased population, there's a concern for high traffic volume, and hence the recommendation was that all school systems close for the day. So again, we have decided to close on April 8th, 2024, and use that as a calamity day. There are still many unknowns about how the eclipse may affect communication, such as radios, cell phones, and much more, so we felt that it was in the best safety of our students and staff to close that day. And again, this is a lifetime event. It will not happen again until 2444. So I don't think anyone in this room will be around for the next one. Our Soaring Eagles at Austenburg, 3rd grade, Carlisle Carruthers was chosen by Mrs. Nelson. She wrote that Carlisle exemplifies a soaring eagle by doing what's right when no one's looking. He is self-motivated to do his best each and every day. He shows pride in himself and in his classroom. Carlisle demonstrates how to work diligently and how to stay on task even if the work is challenging. He is always positive, lends a helping hand or a kind word to peers, tries even when things are difficult, and he could always be found with a smile on his face. So congratulations to him. At Cork, Mrs. Jackham nominated 3rd grader Elsie Jones and wrote that Elsie is an excellent role model for exhibiting the characteristics of a PACS leader. She is organized and caring and enjoys helping others. Elsie also works hard at school and has lots of friends. She does a wonderful job of being a leader at Cork. At GPS in 2nd grade, Mrs. Cochran chose Emma Cutlip and said that Emma's a very kind and loving young lady. She is always willing to offer others a helping hand and is often quick to volunteer to assist me or others in need. She is a hard worker and is always trying her best. She is a great participant in class, often willing to offer her input and added thoughts in our daily class discussions. Emma is an all-around PACS leader and certainly deserves to be awarded this wonderful honor. And I will say she was one of the most excited little girls when I handed her the coin
for the book vending machine. She literally started jumping up and down. It was priceless to see how excited she was. At the middle school, Miss Adams chose Nicholas Ginn, a sixth grader, and said that Nicholas is a kind, well-mannered sixth grader. He will address you by name with a good morning at the beginning of class and have a good day at the end of class. He is a conscientious worker and always works to the best of his ability. Nicholas respects his teachers and his classmates and truly portrays the characteristics of a soaring eagle. And certainly, last but not least, at the high school, 10th grader Sarah Cybalski was chosen by Mr. Chapezi, and he wrote that Sarah is a very hard worker who is always determined to do a good job. She takes a lot of pride in her work. She always has a positive attitude and puts everyone around her in a good mood. She is friendly, funny, outgoing, and willing to help anyone with anything. Sarah will volunteer to help whenever needed, being extremely reliable when doing so. She is an all-around excellent student, excellent person, and a pleasure to have in class. And lastly, just two recognitions that I wanted to share. So last month I shared that a few of our buildings had received a PBIS bronze recognition. And now I can share that we were awarded the District Recognition Award for the 2023 Ohio PBIS Showcase. And again, this would not be possible without the work of, in particular, Mrs. Brzenko, Mrs. Porcello, and Mrs. Doherty. So thank you very much for all of your work on that. It was definitely appreciated. And just the other day, I got an email letting us know the U.S. News and World Report published their 2024 Best Elementary Schools and Best Middle School rankings. And two of our elementaries, Austinburg and Cork, earned a Best Elementary Schools badge, and our middle school earned a Best Middle Schools badge because they were placed in the top 40% of the state. So congratulations to them.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on, I recommend a motion to accept the following new revised replacement policies for board adoptions. Policy numbers are as follows. We have a motion.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, now comes discussion. So there's been some comments and some discussion regarding 9211 at our last board meeting. Looking at policy 9211 and the first page of that, there's some language in green that was recommended by Neola and also encouraged by our legal counsel, but we realize that it is some very limiting language, so I would like to propose slightly different language. So for the paragraph that is in green, I would like to propose language that reads, additionally, school employees and board members will not be permitted to access, manage, or have signatory rights to any district support organization account, or to serve as a voting member or officer of any district support organization, which that language I'm recommending would replace the following language. Additionally, school employees and board members will not manage or have access to district support organization funds or serve as a voting member or officer of the organization. So rather than will not manage or have access, change it to will not be permitted to access, manage, or have signatory rights to any district support organization account.
I like that. I think that's a good compromise. To clarify, that's so that teachers can still collect funds from students.
Well, we would actually be silent on that. So this is interpreted as the account. So we're not going to specifically state that. But however, that is the case where we're not restricting that.
I see. Thank you.
Does anybody have any other discussion on any other policies or this policy? Or are we willing to amend our motion to amend policy 9211 language?
We need a motion for that?
Well, we would need to make sure the person who motioned in second is good with the amended language.
I can motion to change the language on 9211.
I'll second.
Is there any other discussion?
About that one or other ones?
Other ones?
I have a couple of tiny questions about other ones.
Okay.
So, policy 2623.02, third grade reading guarantee.
Hang on one second. 2623.02?
Yep.
Okay.
Everybody there? I want to know what the difference is between are expected to versus must. Are expected to me, says that's the goal. That's what we aim for. Must, to me, says if they don't, there's a consequence. So what happens if a child does not reach the level that they're supposed to reach? I think must is too strong a language, because if they don't, there's no,
Well, must is going away. Must
Doesn't
is,
change from
must is
Neola.
what it, this is a policy recommendation from Neola. So
oh,
must.
it is the must that's going away. I have
Must-
it backwards.
Yep, must is going
I
away.
apologize. I had it
Okay.
backwards.
All right, so you're good with that?
I'm good.
Okay.
The other one, policy 5320, immunizations.
5320.
There's a list of immunizations that we require, and I'm wondering where COVID is on that in the thought process for everybody. Is that, do we include COVID vaccine or do we not? Do we not want to even get into that? What's everybody's thoughts about that?
Well, this is
That
recommended.
language isn't optional. That language is a required language change.
From, required by statute? Required by whom?
Required
Neola.
through
By
Neola. That's not optional language.
No, but we can add, can't we? We could add COVID if we chose to.
You can add language, yes.
So I'm asking, do we want to add COVID to the list of vaccinations that we require?
I do not.
Right? Anybody else have any thoughts? Because I would like to see it added.
I'm not, can you explain what you're asking? You
I'm
want to
asking that we add
require
COVID.
that parents have to get their child vaccinated for COVID? Is that what you're asking? Or suggesting, rather?
Yes. I guess so. I just want to know what the board's feeling is about that. Do we want to consider, I'm not saying we should, I'm saying, do we want to consider doing so? Or do we just want to leave it the way it is?
She wants to add to this list right here.
I think until we get to a point where Neola is telling us that that is the suggested language, I would feel more comfortable leaving it the way that they have it written.
And
Okay.
I would agree with that.
So we wait for Neola to decide?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, supposedly, the powers that be have stated that it's going to be more like a flu issue, where you might yearly have to have a shot for the flu or whatever. And in which case, that would kind of take care of this situation. So I think I'd rather leave it as it is.
Okay.
Till we know more about
We can do
what's
that. I just
happening.
was curious what the board's thoughts were on that. And one more thing, policy 8210, the school calendar. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it says we're eliminating the blizzard bags. And I was curious as to what the reasoning is behind that.
I'm
Is that
sorry,
real?
what number?
8210.
Is that on the back?
I don't know. I don't have my actual paper.
Yeah, it's on the back. They are eliminating the language that said the plan may also include distribution of blizzard bags, which are paper copies of the lessons posted online. I believe you reported on in your legislative report on a bill that was approved that did just that. That's why Neola recommends these changes based on the statutes that they reference or the
Okay.
Ohio Ethics Commission or Administrative Code. And that is their recommendation according to the current changes in statute that blizzard bags are basically
Just be
eliminated.
eliminated.
Geneva hasn't really used blizzard bags too much
I guess that's what my
over the
question is.
years.
It was in there, did we use it? Is that a thing that will disrupt learning if we eliminate that? You don't,
I don't think so. We have, now that we've changed from days to hours, I don't think we would ever reach that point.
Okay.
Knock on wood.
okay,
It's not gonna snow this winter.
thank you. And then a general question real quick. It's not gonna snow this winter.
It's not.
No, that's okay. I got it. That's it. I'm done with the policies. Thank you.
Does anyone have anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on the district support organizations policy. I just want to say that I was very opinionated on that policy and the suggested changes, and I appreciate the efforts that this board and our superintendent have made to try and keep it easier for our parents and our staff to volunteer in these organizations. They are so needed. Our students need them, the district needs them, and I believe that this language change, in my opinion, speaking for myself and not the board, will keep a lot of the process the same. So I appreciate us trying to come to some kind of an agreement that I think will work for everybody.
Roll call?
Right, since Mrs. Metzler moved and Ms. Fisher seconded the original motion, what the first roll call is going to be to amend that motion per Mrs. Metzler's motion and Mrs. Milliken Dixon's motion, okay? So you're voting, you amend the motion, you have to vote to amend that original motion. So Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes.
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
And Mrs. Milliken Dixon?
Yes.
And now to vote on those, accepting those policies with that new language in 9211. Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes.
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
And Mrs. Milliken Dixon?
Yes. So I do want to say my general comment about the policies. I would like to see on our agenda that we put a brief description of the policy in addition to the number. I just think it's just easier than having to go to the website, look it up, find each policy. If we just put fundraising, conflict of interest, whatever the title is on the actual policy, there's just a 2 or 3 word description. I'd like to see that on the agenda as well.
Okay.
That make sense? Can we do that?
I mean, that's up to the board.
Yeah. Can we do that?
I'm fine with that. I think it would be helpful.
I think that's just helpful. I think it's more clearly communicated when there's a description. You okay with that? Sam?
When you mean description, do you mean like the title of the policy? Is that
Yeah,
what you're
just the
looking?
title of the policy.
Title of the policy?
Whatever's in bold there when you look up the policy on the website, I'd like to just see that little phrase included on our agendas.
Okay, are we good on policies then? Okay. I recommend that the board approve the enclosed MOU between Geneva Area City School Board of Education and OPSI Local Number 307.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
There was an MOU in place last year, and we are looking to extend it for another year. The MOU would allow bargaining unit members from other classifications who have their CDL to serve as a sub bus driver.
Roll call?
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon?
Yes.
And Mr. Ortiz?
Yes. I recommend that the board approve the enclosed resolution adopting a last chance agreement with Tammy Hall.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon?
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes.
And Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
The following change order is enclosed for the board's review for the board office addition from Hammond Construction for the revision of the sanitary service lateral and additional cleanouts. This is the change order that we talked about at the previous board meeting.
We didn't approve it that time?
No.
It wasn't on the agenda.
Oh,
It's
we just-
within the scope that you granted
Right.
the superintendent to approve
Okay.
change orders.
I just didn't realize we hadn't already approved it. Okay.
Well, we're not approving it, we're
Right.
just being notified of it. It's
Oh, because
within.
it falls under your, yes, thank you.
Can I just say, this change order references Exhibit A, but that was not included in our information. Can I get that sent to me possibly? Under the contract is changed as follows. It talks about, it says as outlined in Exhibit A, and there is no Exhibit A attached. So can it be sent to us? Okay. All right, thank you.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Metzler, where is that?
Right here.
Not on the agenda.
Oh, I see, it's on the actual, yeah, okay.
Okay, the treasurer recommends that the board approve the enclosed resolution declaring it necessary to renew an existing .85 mil tax levy for the purpose of general ongoing permanent improvements and requesting the Ashtabula County Auditor to make certain certifications pursuant to sections 5705.03 and 5705.21 of the Ohio Revised Code.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Well, this is a very quick timeline, and so I had consulted with Mrs. Ortiz, asking her if she wanted me to include this resolution on this board agenda. Because the spring primary is in March, the filing deadline with the Board of Elections is the same date as your next meeting, December 20th. So the first resolution would have to be passed today, get the certification from the county auditor, and then pass a second resolution at a special board meeting prior to December 20th in order to be able to get it to the Board of Elections no later than December 20th. Can't wait till the evening of, that would be too late.
Okay.
Roll call?
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon?
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes.
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
And Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
The treasurer recommends approval of the 5-year forecast projection of revenues and expenditures for the current fiscal year and in the ensuing 4-year fiscal years, and the significant assumptions upon which the numbers are based as required by HB 412.
I'll move.
Second.
You're going to present, correct?
I am.
Okay, at this time, Mr. Lillie is going to present. This is my favorite.
And thank you, Mrs. Markajon, for coming here on your birthday to hear the 5-year forecast presentation.
That's why she's here.
As you came in tonight, there were a 5-year forecast page back on the table along with the agendas and the financial report. 5-year forecast is required to be filed with the Ohio Department of Education and the Auditor of State's Office before the end of November of each year. Now, it used to be October, and then updated again in either April or May if there are any substantial changes. So I am going to run through the assumptions which will be posted along with the forecast on the Ohio Department of Education website once it's submitted, as well as posted on the district's website. So in this 5-year forecast, the property taxes, we don't have any updated information yet for the triennial valuation. We have been apprised by the county auditor that Ashtabula County's overall increase was going to be 32%, which many of you, if you've checked the website and seen the update to your own home's valuation, you may have seen a large increase. But that doesn't necessarily result in an increase in property tax collections for the district because of the House Bill 920 that puts in reduction factors to keep most of our levies, which are all continuing and have been on the books for a long period of time, at the same level that they were collected when they were voted. So other than inside millage and new construction, we really don't see much of an increase. So for the property tax line 1.10, I show in the assumptions our valuation history. And the last 2022 valuation showed $400,454,190, which was an increase of 2.78% over 2021. It shows by fiscal year the amount of property tax revenue received in the general fund, which in fiscal year 2023 was $7,767,372, which was a 2.08% increase over 22. And then in the assumptions, we show what our forecast projects, which is for fiscal year 24, a 2% increase, for fiscal year 25, a 2.5% increase, for fiscal year 26, 1%, 2% for 27, and 2% for 28. So I'm only looking for, as the effects of the triennial update will hit us in the at the end of this fiscal year and the beginning of the next fiscal year, just looking for that 2% and 2.5% increase. And then when we get into 28, 27, we're looking at the effects of the 2026 sexennial appraisal, the every 6 year where they actually go in and appraise the properties rather than looking at the sales of properties in the area. The district is on the 20 mil floor for residential and agriculture, but for commercial industrial, we're at 22.502. For 2022, new numbers will come out once the county auditor releases the numbers for 2023. Regarding the school district income tax, we show a little history in the assumptions of how those collections have gone. And as we have surpassed the original full collected value, our increases will shrink. You know, we're only looking at, say, increases in actual salaries as across the district. So now that it's reached that full collection amount, our forecast is projecting a 4.2% increase for fiscal year 24, a 2.1% increase for fiscal year 25, a 1.1% increase for 26, 0.6% for fiscal year 27, and 0.5% for fiscal year 28. And of course, any change or reduction to the Ohio adjusted gross income caused by a recession or another pandemic could negatively impact those collections. So hopefully that's not going to occur.
Yeah, don't say that out loud.
The next line, 1.035 and 1.040, are unrestricted and restricted grants and aids from the state. This, of course, is our largest funding source. I still maintain in our assumptions a little history on the DeRolf note that had ruled funding formula unconstitutional, and now with the Fair School Funding Plan in place, it's hopefully moving to a time where it is considered and has been by one of the founders of that, Bob Cupp, who was a former Supreme Court Justice, that this plan is constitutional, meets that constitutional muster. So go through a little history of the changes in state funding method, and then in the assumptions on page 4, we arrive at our state aid assumptions for this forecast. So these state resources for this foundation are updated from the November #1 foundation settlement report, the most recent report that we have. And at this point, all the inputs, all the enrollment have been updated in there, so we're basically should be seeing what we are going to get for the year, although there will be changes as any enrollment ADM are updated during the year. But it does, and it also reflects the direct funding of students being educated by the district, which was part of the Fair School Funding Plan. Something to note is that Geneva is now on the formula and receiving no guarantee funding, thanks to that Fair School Funding Plan. We have been on a guarantee since fiscal year 2008, meaning, whatever funding we would have received was less. The guarantee kept us at a certain level. As you look through that history, you can see the different changes in the funding. At one point, we were getting 1% less in the OEBM model that Governor Strickland put in place, 2% less the second year. Other than those reductions and other reductions when DeWine reduced, because of the recession, reduced funding, or actually due to COVID, reduced the funding, we have been on a guarantee. Now we are funded on the formula. So the forecast shows slight increases for fiscal year 23 through 28, where in the past we were pretty flat throughout the forecast because of being on the guarantee. We weren't going to get any additional aid. So those numbers for state resource, you can see a little chart on the page 5 that shows your state resources, your preschool unit funding, special ed transportation, and casino tax revenue, all part of the unrestricted aid. The catastrophic aid is shown for fiscal year 22. Our reimbursement was $258,427, while fiscal year 23 was $343,102. This has never been funded fully, but the percentage that is funded increased with the Fair School Funding Plan because money was set aside from the special education funding. 10% was taken to help increase the catastrophic cost reimbursements. So this forecast is going to project reimbursement at $300,000 per year. These have fluctuated, and sometimes actually there was a big dip in one year in the percentage that was funded as the amounts had increased in the state appropriation at one point, and more districts began to file catastrophic cost reimbursements, which then brought down the total reimbursement because there's only a pot of money available. So the more that are in there, then the less percentage you get of your expected amount. ADM will now be very important with the Fair School Funding Plan now that the district is on the formula. Formula ADM is showing pretty flat throughout the forecast over the last 4 years. It's been fairly flat, not any big reductions, and definitely no increase. A note on casino revenue. Well, during COVID, casinos shut down, casino revenue dropped, and it's not a large part of our funding, but it does bring in fiscal year 22, it had rebounded to $138,970, and that rebound continued in fiscal year 23 with $142,373. Looking at calendar year 23, we're seeing a 1.36% drop. So as I had in previous forecasts, projecting a drop of about 1% each year due to competition from other gambling venues, which we don't receive money from. So that is all shown on that chart. With the unrestricted aid, you see the numbers for student wellness and success, which should go up each year. As you look at the state resources for foundation and student wellness and success, what you're going to see is because the inputs in each biennium, they're updated in the first year of a biennium budget will have a larger increase than the second year because the inputs are going to remain the same for the second year. The legislature wants to know what the cost of that biennium budget is going to be. They don't have the opportunity to apply, more recent updates during that year and know that cost, and they don't want to put something in, like say using slipping my mind, basically cost of living adjustment each year. They don't want to use anything like that, so the inputs are updated, and then any other changes are just in the phase-in of the formula, which this year the formula is at 50%, and and 66.67% next year. As far as the phase-in of the whole formula, remember, we didn't get all the formula money up front. It's been phased in 1/6 each year. So you'll have that phase-in, which will increase funding somewhat in the second year of a biennium, but with the inputs, probably looking at like a 5% increase in looking at what happened last year and looking at the simulations that the state put out for this year. Got a 5% increase in the first year and about a 0.5% increase in the second year. So much smaller, but there is some increase. When we look at the state share of local property taxes, now this used to be called the property tax allocation, but as Mrs. Milliken Dixon again reported, it had to be changed by statute to calling it the state share of local property taxes. I have always calculated this as a percentage of real estate collections, and that percentage has been going down each year for a couple reasons. One is the income limitations that reduce eligibility for the homestead reimbursement. That has resulted in a reduction in the homestead reimbursement almost every year. And in talking to the county auditor, Ashtabula County has a lot of homes that have turned into Airbnbs. So as an Airbnb, they only receive the 10% non-business credit and not the full 12.5% for an owner-occupied home. So our percentage shrinks. I mean, it's never going to go below 10%. It probably won't reach there because there are owner-occupied homes receiving the 12.5% reduction. But in fiscal year 22, that percentage was down to 10.96% of real estate collections, and fiscal year 23 dropped to 10.78%. So gradual percentage decrease is projected until it bottoms out at 10.44% in fiscal year 26. So that's the assumption on this forecast. We have some notes for all other revenues, which include a number of things: other local taxes, payment in lieu of taxes. You see on the chart at the bottom of page 6, our Spire pilot payment, which will now end in fiscal year 27. That'll be the last year that the district receives $197,208. At that point, it will go on the tax duplicate, and they will be paying their property taxes, but adding much, if you recall, a much lower valuation than what was originally built in the construction cost.
Do we know how much?
Yeah, that valuation was down around $9 million, where the original evaluation was $54 million.
Yikes.
So, but they will be paying taxes on that lesser valuation. You see, again, note in here, I still have open enrollment in here, but with direct funding, we don't receive any money for open enrollment, just as we don't have anything going out for open enrollment and those other deductions that used to occur. You see parent preschool tuition, tuition from other districts, student fees, C-Power, demand response. So in fiscal year 23, we received $28,271. But now we had one more demand response payment, but the district chose not to participate in this, at least for this year, and that'll probably be a year-to-year decision. So we're down to just the student fees, which are basically parking permits at the high school.
Oh, okay.
Interest income, you see a big increase now with the rates increasing and the investment portfolio that the district has being invested at higher rates. We still have some lower rates that were invested because economists were saying that we would not see a recovery until after fiscal year 24. So we still have some lower interest earning investments, but those have come up to where our interest income in 23 was $253,723. That's the highest we've had in a long, long time. Already through the first 4 months, we've earned in general fund over $190,000 in interest. So I'm projecting that to be at $500,000. We get a lot of, have a lot of maturities because of needs, because the district it doesn't receive any property tax collections other than July and August, and then in the second half of the fiscal year, the beginning of the next tax collection year, January, February, and March, we don't have that money coming in addition to our state foundation funding, which is twice a month. We don't have that money coming in April, May, and in June, although we do have our rollback and homestead reimbursement from the state, usually in April. And September, October, November, December are lower revenue months. We do have the school district income tax coming in quarterly, but we have a lot of maturities in September, October, November, and December. So that we make sure we have money to cover our expenses through the end of the year when we don't have money coming in. And so we're looking at 500,000 and then showing a slight increase in that up to 600,000 in fiscal year 27. Hopefully, the rates will continue to stay steady and not see a decrease, but obviously, if at any time there was a decrease, then that would change this forecast on that. Miscellaneous, which are property rentals, donations, administrative fees for fuel tanks, and insurance proceeds, are shown here. In fiscal year 24, as I mentioned earlier, we received that $975 insurance payment. So that balloons the fiscal year 24 amount on here, and then we go back to what we expect to receive in property rentals and so on. So it goes down there. And then you have the pay to participate numbers. So these totals are up a little higher based on that interest income, but you do see a drop as in fiscal year 28 as the pilot payment expires. Other financing sources, the district did sell items through public surplus auction and cleared $1,700 in September 2023. And we have plans to sell or trade in old buses for at least $9,800 this year. That $9,800 is the trade-in value from Rush Bus Center for the 6 buses. So our hope will be for some of those buses, we may be able to get more than the trade-in value. The projection for future years is $6,000. We also have in here refunds of prior year expenditures, which fluctuate a lot. We had a large OT and speech reimbursement from the ESC for our DD units in fiscal year 22, so that made that a little high. We're looking for $150,829 in fiscal year 23, and then the projection for fiscal year 24 is $70,000 and $50,000 per year after that. For a while, we were getting a lot of BWC rebates that drove that number up as you look back at the history, but we don't expect to receive any BWC rebates in the future, not the rebates like they were given. We get little rebates on the programs that we participate in much smaller amounts that are received during the course of the year. On the expenditure side, for fiscal year 23, when you look at the history on the 5-year forecast, and this would be on line 3.010 for salaries, 3.020 for the fringe benefits. We still have some positions that remain unfilled, like a bus driver. We did fill the gifted teacher position this year, but that was not in place in 23. We were looking for a second elementary guidance teacher that has not been filled. So fiscal year 23 wages increased on this forecast 3.96% over fiscal year 22. So an increase of 4% is shown for fiscal year 24, along with an allowance for unfilled positions and a new assistant mechanic maintenance position added in there. Once ESSER funds are exhausted, any positions that are continued will hit the forecast in fiscal year 25 at about $410,000 in salary and $250,000 in fringes, with a 5% total increase in wages to cover any negotiated base increases, step increases, projected yearly. Now, the amount that I have shown coming in from ESSER funds does not include, my assumption is here is that coming out of COVID, we've been doing a lot of extended blended learning, summer learning. We have been funding that with ESSER funds. So this is assuming that when those ESSER funds are exhausted, that's not going to continue. We've been spending over $150,000 a year on that. So that is not included in the $410,000 in salary and $250,000 in fringes. So if the district decided to fund that in the general fund and continue that, then that would add costs to the 5-year forecast that's not currently shown. Medical premium was increased 6.3% for fiscal year '24. We had that conversation at previous board meeting. So fringes are projected to increase 5.5% overall in fiscal year '24, along with a $942,405 payment to the Asheville County Schools Council of Government. Remember, we had the board approve a $1 million payment because our reserve was gone. Some of that went into lunchroom. That's the difference between the $1 million and the $942,000. This was the general fund portion of that COG payment. A 10% medical premium increase is built into the overall increase of 8% for the next 4 years, along with the changes noted above. Now, any additional increase in the number of personnel employed by the district beyond what is noted in the forecast, or a larger increase in insurance premiums, could have a material effect on both the personal service and fringe benefit amounts. So, you know, the reason we had to make that $1 million payment, we've had a high number of catastrophic claims, and our claims, insurance claims cost, medical, has exceeded the premiums that we've been paying in. So we either are going to have larger medical or premium increases, and you see in the history here, it's been, we had no insurance premium increase in '21, 5% in '22, 6% in '23, and the 6.3% increase this year. So we're looking at least 10% that we're probably going to have to increase in order to keep up with the claims costs. Purchase services, a 4% increase is projected each remaining year. The use of student wellness and success funds and ESSER funds keeps about $264,000 out of this category until fiscal year '26. I believe we're going to have until the end of fiscal year '25 to spend our remaining student wellness and success funds that were given to us in a previous biennium. We start this year with $990,000 there to spend, so that will have to be spent over 2 years. So we'll be able to keep that in there. This has helped fund the school resource officer, community counseling, school community liaison, the residency liaison, fund some covering the registration fees for the YMCA Latchkey program, along with snacks, some professional development, a number of other things. So we are going to have to spend more of that if we have this year and next year to spend that money. Supplies and materials, the forecast projects $730,000 per year as additional textbooks are replaced, and another $50,000 beginning in fiscal year '25 for supplies previously purchased with ESSER funds. This would include different software purchases that we have made, unless the district decides to no longer use that software. In capital outlay, we have not been spending, especially this past year, fiscal year '23, anywhere close to what we had forecasted, which is $250,000 each year. An additional $54,000 is shown added in fiscal year '25 for equipment purchases covered by ESSER funds through fiscal year '24. You know, this is according to the district's technology plan. If we're going to continue to replace our technology, we will have to spend money here. I have noted here at the end of that assumption that the failure of the district's .85 mil PI levy would add $250,000 each year for bus purchases in the future. So right now we have been utilizing ESSER funds to purchase buses, and I know the superintendent has plans to make one more round of bus purchases to get rid of some older buses. So once we're done with that and we start getting back into our bus replacement program, hopefully replacing 2 buses a year, we have been using PI funds in the past to purchase those buses, as discussed previously. When you go out to bid now, the cost of those diesel buses is about $125,000. In the last round, we got them for less than $112,000 because we piggybacked off a prior Ohio Schools Council bid. So if that levy doesn't pass, then those dollars will come into this. Right now, they're not shown. Other objects, which include county auditor and treasurer fees, fees on delinquent taxes paid, election expenses, bank charges, our annual single audit, professional dues, fees, memberships, and student activity miscellaneous. The forecast projects $327,158 for fiscal year 24, escalating 10,000. You can see in the assumptions that since fiscal year 18, this has grown each year. The costs go up. Obviously, county auditor and treasurer fees increase as property tax collections increase. They are a percentage of those collections. For advances and transfers, so we have had no transfer needed to the lunchroom coming out of COVID and the larger federal reimbursement amounts gave us for the first time a positive balance in fiscal year 22. And that positive balance should carry us through at least fiscal year 26. I mean, it dropped last year. Lunchroom spent $108,000 more than it took in last year. The hope is that our normal transfer was about $70,000. Right now, this year's running a lot closer with revenues meeting expenses and should get better as the year goes on until in June. Since we have expenses that month and don't have much revenue, it will go down a little bit. But the forecast is projecting that we will be carried through fiscal year 26, and then after that we will need about $70,000 if we have the same level of transfer as before COVID for the remaining years. And there will be, the next item on the agenda is a transfer that's included here of $4,988 to clear negative student balances from fiscal year 22, and that also might be needed in fiscal year 24, and we'll talk about that in the next item. Our transfer in fiscal year 23 was $81,421, with $76,233 to athletics and $5,188 to band. The athletic transfer could be over $90,000 this year, so $96,000 will be projected for fiscal year 24 and $108,000 through fiscal year 26. And then you would add to that the $70,000 for lunchroom after fiscal year 26. At the end of the 5-year forecast, one of the last lines is revenue from new levies, 13.010 and 13.020. So have a note in here that includes a little history. Our designation is pre-fiscal caution in August of 2017. The income tax levy passing. So the note just is here to make the board aware that the board will need to carefully consider the reinstatement of cuts as the levy money grows and monitor the effects of the COVID pandemic in order to stay within the guidelines established by ODE's Office of School Finance and avoid any further designation of fiscal caution or fiscal warning. When ESSER and Student Wellness and Success funds run out, the district will need to be in a position to either absorb reinstated new positions funded by those sources or make cuts. With the passage of the school district income tax, no other revenue from new levies is shown in this forecast, but it will be necessary to renew the school district income tax no later than 2028 or face losing almost $5 million in revenue. The forecast is showing just over $4.9 million on that line 1.030 in fiscal year 28. So when you get to that point, until that's renewed, the forecast would show half that amount, say, in fiscal year '29, because it would be exhausted at the end of '28, no more revenue would be collected. I mean, there'll be some collections probably coming in the way it works, some lingering collections, but they'll be much smaller until you would show nothing up there. And once, if it is renewed, or before it's renewed, that would show down here on line 13.010 under the revenue from new levies. And once renewed, then it would continue to be projected up at the top. So you can see with this 5-year forecast, again, the district looks very good through 24, 25, and 26. Some red develops in 27 and 28, where our expenditures begin to exceed our revenues. And again, that's why the caution is there, and there's plenty of time to take a look at that. I mean, things can change in this 4 or 5 years out, very difficult to project whether additional monies would come in or whether the expenditures wouldn't be as high as projected. So there's time to make any adjustments, to avoid dropping. But the whole idea should be, God bless you, should be to try to align our expenditures with our revenues and get down to that point where, the board did approve a cash balance policy last year that says we're going to maintain at least 90 true days cash, or basically 25% carryover fund. And so there's plenty of room to get down there, get down towards that, closer towards that. So that is the 5-year forecast that I'm asking the board to approve tonight. I don't know if there are any questions from the board.
I do have a question, Kevin, if I may, Madam President.
Yes.
First off, a good brief, Kevin. On page 5, on the state share of local property taxes, it says the rollback in homestead is reimbursed from the state of Ohio for tax credits given owner-occupied residents, 12.5%. But it says the property owners over age 65, a homestead reimbursement is available, but an income limitation reduces that eligibility.
It used to be that many people over 65 received that homestead reimbursement, but they had placed an income limitation in there a number of years ago, and that income limitation increases each year, so it reduces the number of people that are eligible for the homestead reimbursement. So our homestead reimbursement has gradually declined because of that income limitation.
And you have it in here as 12.5%?
12.5% is the total rollback given on owner-occupied residences. So you live in your house, you can receive the 12.5%. You have a house that you don't live in, you only receive 10%.
Okay, so those are two different things then.
What's P? You get, there's a 10% rollback and there's an additional 2.5% rollback. So if I live in my house, I see a 12.5% rollback on my tax bill. If I bought a house and turned it into an Airbnb and did not live in it, I would only get 10% reimbursement on that, and not the full 12.5.
And more of our homes are doing that.
According to the county auditor in the Geneva School District, there are a lot of homes that have converted to Airbnbs, and so that's the only thing he could offer as an explanation, in addition to the homestead on this total reduction, why it keeps going down.
But how does it keep going down if an Airbnb limits the tax break that the property owner gets? That means the property owner is paying more because it is a secondary resident.
The property owner is paying based on the tax duplicate. This is the reimbursement that we get from the state for rollback and homestead. And remember, if we had new levies, the rollback's no longer available on new levies. So all our levies are, property tax levies are continuing. We receive the rollback and homestead reimbursement each year. The difference in the 12 and a half, which it used to be closer to 12 and a half, that we got the full amount, with these reductions that have occurred, it's getting down closer to the base level of 10% for the non-business credit.
Okay.
But it's never gonna get less than 10%. And because there will always be people getting the full 12.5%, like, you can see the history there. Actually, the percentage was 12.58% for fiscal year 19, 11.95% for fiscal year 20, 11.42% for 21, 10.96 for 22, and 10.78 for fiscal year 23. It continues to decline each year, so I show that gradually declining a little more before I'm basically projecting that it'll bottom out at 10.44% in fiscal year 26. Just going off the percentage changes each year, that it's going to get down to a point it really can't go much further than that.
Okay, thanks. Good brief, Kevin.
So on that same note, the 12.58, is that because of catch-up or something? Because that's in excess of the 12.5?
It could been, probably in fiscal year 19, we actually had a lower amount. If you look back on the real estate collection note, you see in fiscal year 19, we received a negative, we received a decrease in our collections from 18, 1.22% less. And we have the Spire pilot payment moved to all other revenues. So in 2018, that was showing up, that was dictated in the first year that was collected by the county treasurer and had to be reported in real estate collections. With the pilot being entered into, that moved out of real estate and moved to all other revenues. So we had that decrease.
Okay.
So with that decrease, we had a higher, a higher percentage.
So just to clarify, on other objects on page 9, when you're talking about fees, it says auditor and treasurer charges or fees. That's county auditor and that's state treasurer?
No, county auditor and county treasurer, the different fees that are applied in collecting the taxes, in collecting property taxes.
So is the fee that the state of Ohio charges us to act as the collector for the
That is in
income
here
tax?
as well.
Okay.
The income tax collection, that's mentioned in the note. School district income tax administration fee added in fiscal year 19 has increased to over $60,000 per year.
Okay, all right, thank you. Does anybody have anything else? Roll call?
Mrs. Milliken Dixon?
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes.
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher? And Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
The treasurer recommends approval of a transfer from the general fund to the lunchroom in the amount of $4,987.54 to clear bad debt from the 2022-23 school year as per board policy 8500 and federal and state guidelines.
I'll move.
Any discussion?
Yeah, so, excuse me. So, I understood part of the connection when you just connected it to your 5-year forecast, but I still don't. So the last time you reported on this, and then you said it again this evening, that the lunchroom is in the.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with the finance side, with what's on our financial report. Nothing to do with that. What this
Okay.
has to do with is, we have a policy that needs to be changed.
Okay,
Or we may face this every year in the future. This has never been a problem
Okay.
before, because our negative balances were very small and were usually taken care of through donations. You've seen donations over the years reported for people donating money to wipe out negative balances
Sure.
in lunchroom accounts. For instance, at the end of the previous year, fiscal year 21, the negative balances were like $45.11, and those were
Right.
taken care of through donations.
okay,
Coming out of COVID and the federal reimbursements that made all lunches and breakfasts free. Well, people got used to that, and it's almost like an entitlement. And this isn't just Geneva's problem, this is a problem in many districts across the country. People aren't paying for their lunches. They know, a couple things have gone on. They used to, if somebody didn't bring money for the lunch, they got an alternative lunch, peanut butter and jelly sandwich or something. ODE issued guidance to our food service directors that there should be no more what they termed meal shaming. So
Yes.
everybody else is getting their tray with their type A lunch.
It's turkey and
This
mashed
kid
potatoes, and he gets a PB&J.
gets a PB&J, and they know, oh, you didn't have any money for your lunch. So
Right.
no more meal shaming, so they're supposed to provide the child with a type A lunch, whether they have money in their account to cover it or not.
Right.
And some families apparently are not paying. You can see the list, the names were on what I sent you, the names
Yes.
and the student IDs were wiped out, but you saw all the balances. Middle school had, at the end of '23, $1,182.64
Oh, so there's the
in
connection.
unpaid
Okay.
lunches, the GPS. So this isn't on the district's books, it's in My NutriKids, the software. These kids have negative balances at the end of the year, and according to our policy, if there's a negative balance at the end of the year, it's considered bad debt. If your policy considers it bad debt, then the federal guidelines and the state guidelines say that you have to wipe that out using local
Okay.
sources, non-state or federal sources, and eliminate those negative balances. So in order, we have to follow that policy, and again, this is the first year, but it's gonna happen again next year, very possibly, if the same mindset is happening out there and people aren't paying for their lunches.
So then what's the solution? What do we need to do to
The,
that
the
policy?
solution is to change the policy and not classify it as bad debt. Then, while we may remove it for the lunchroom so they start fresh with the account, it will stay just like other fees that are collected by the buildings. And usually they keep those fees on, they get to graduation, and, kids are presented with, if they haven't paid their fees, they don't walk in graduation, and then usually the fees are paid so that they can walk in graduation. So they can continue to make attempts to collect the fees. But with the policy that we have now, it's bad debt, we have to wipe it out, and we can't continue to try to collect it in the future.
I see. So are we gonna see that on an agenda, or?
Well, it's something that will have to be worked out with Neola and get something, the idea you have to have it in place prior to the beginning of next school year, because you have to advertise your policies for, not having negative balances, having lunches. And so Michelle has done some research on this, talked to the state, find out what needs to be done. She'll work with the superintendent to make a change, and if the board passes that policy, then while we may, like I said, if there are negative balances, but hopefully they would be working on it more, we would continue to probably want to wipe it out so that the kid, there's different things that happen in the software and so on. If they have negative balances, they might not come up. They may not be able to pay into the system, the My NutriKids system. So the recommendation from the food service director would be to continue to make the transfer from general fund, but then we'd still be able to try to collect on that money once it's transferred.
Sure. So recoup it still, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
What happens if it's not paid?
It's not paid. It's revenue that we don't realize.
So it's just sunk cost that goes,
Right. I mean, this happens, if a student leaves the district, they move out of town, their sophomore year, and then they're not around for graduation, and, I mean, that usually seems to be the thing that drives payment, a lot of these fees. We see a lot of fees collected at the end of May and beginning of June prior to graduation.
And we really do that? We keep a child from graduating?
From walking,
Right.
Oh, from walking.
yeah.
That's a good
Can't
distinction. Okay. They can't
prevent 'em from
participate in the
graduating.
ceremony. Is there a limit, or is it if they owe 25 cents? If there's any fee attached to the student, they don't walk?
I mean, it's pretty much on an individual basis. I don't know that there's a threshold of a quarter,
I was
but
just curious. I mean,
I know that this is something that Mrs. Papick and I have met on already, and she has researched some other districts to look at their policies, and we've tried to pick and choose what we feel would work best, combining it to a policy for us. But as Mr. Lillie indicated, it would need to be put in place prior to the start of next school year and advertised to parents.
Perfect, thank you.
And I've noticed that most of the donations that have come in the last couple of years seem to have been for the pay-to-play rather than going to the lunchroom.
Well, we've always had we have little donations, like last year, there were donations made, $50, $25. But yeah, there have been donations for the Mark Race Pay to Participate Fund to help with Pay to Participate.
But
Yeah.
just to clarify, once it's considered bad debt and paid for out of the general fund, then it's just
Wiped out.
wiped out.
We've replaced the lost revenue that the lunchroom would have received if that was collected. And according to federal guidelines, that's what we have to do. We have to clear those, but because we label it as bad debt in our policy, we wipe it out and don't make efforts to collect it after that.
Well, we should, so that's a good change, I think, okay.
Roll call?
Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes.
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
And Mrs. Milliken Dixon?
Yes,
I recommend the following personnel actions for the 23-24 contract year.
so moved.
Discussion?
I realized that she left at this point, but Mrs. Schroeder was here this evening, and just again to thank her for her 33 years of service. Combined with the 3 retirements is 73 years. So again, I think that speaks to the dedication of their years to the district.
Roll call?
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher? Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon?
Yes.
And Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes. I recommend the following volunteer coaches for the 23-24 school year.
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Fisher? Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon?
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes.
And Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
I can't read and talk at the same time. All right.
Okay, at this time, we've reached the public comment section of our meeting. The board has adopted bylaw 0169.1 to provide for 30 minutes of public participation at regular meetings of the board. Each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 5 minutes in duration, and no participant may speak more than once on the same topic unless all others who wish to speak on that topic have been heard. All participants are expected to comply with the standards set forth in the board policy manual with regard to public participation. When you step up to the microphone, please state your name and address for the record. And at this time, we will now begin the 30 minutes of public participation for tonight's meeting. Hang on one second, I don't think you're loud enough. Okay.
Yeah, you can. No one has any doubt of that, Mary.
Mary Allison, 5076 Lake Road East, Geneva, Ohio. On the behalf of OPSI 307, I do not understand how you guys keep passing the MOUs when we have not even dealt with it yet. I didn't even know about this one till after our regular meeting, which is always the first Monday of the month. And I had told the superintendent that we were in the midst of our big Kris Kringle Craft Fair, which is what raises our scholarship money. So we did not have time. We can't just turn around and pass this. We have to get it out to all the board members, or our union members, sorry. And then we have to have a date that we can vote and make up the ballots for the voting before we can pass anything like this. So if this is to happen again, which it keeps happening, it would be better to say it's pending, OPSI approval or something, because it's not in writing yet and you're passing it. I don't understand how this is working. Or if you had public speaking at the beginning, then I could explain that we haven't passed it yet, and then you could say, hey, we're gonna be pending on this. I just don't feel like it's right how you're treating the union with this. And on another personal note, Matt Deering, teacher, wonderful person, still not here. Kids are gonna be testing that didn't pass the government test. He is excellent at what he does, and yet he's not back. Nobody says anything, we just sit on it, and like, admit if you're wrong or whatever, but bring them back so these kids have half a chance to pass this government test. I don't understand what's taking so long.
Jack Dubsky, 142 Lockwood Street, Geneva, Ohio. I want to reiterate on what Mary just said about Matt Deering. What are we doing here? What are we doing with it? We're putting this guy's life in limbo. Bring him back to work. Change is coming January 1st. It's coming. And there's going to be more change on the horizon, Ms. Ortiz and Mr. Arndt. Start listening. Start working better with your unions, first of all. What an embarrassment. 23 years I spent as a union official, and I've never seen a board approve an MOU that the union hasn't even voted on yet. Do any of you understand how contracts work and bargaining unit language up there? When I saw that on the agenda tonight, I even confirmed with another local labor leader to make sure that what I was seeing was correct. And he said, if he was the business agent of this union, you would have an ULP filed over something like that. Enough's enough. You guys don't know what you're doing, and you're voting on things that aren't even approved by the union. How does one do that? I don't know why Mr. Deering's still out. I've known Matt Deering for 20 years. He's an uncle of my stepchildren that I raised. Fantastic guy. Fantastic guy. So I would ask you all, when you have your little executive session tonight, let's discuss Mr. Deering and when we're bringing him back, because you're only hurting our kids. I want to congratulate this board, minus Marti and Amber, for successfully killing a 60-year-old levy renewal. And unless the change happens by March, the community's so fired up by the crap that's gone on in this district since your inception. They've told you time and time again, we're not going to give you no more money. New money, renewal money, etc. And I want to thank you for making it so easy to get Brock Pearson and Michelle Craig elected by an overwhelming majority. Overwhelming. Change is coming. Get your ducks in a row.
Okay, with no one else at the microphone, do we have board member reports? Mrs. Dixon?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm writing something down real quick. Can't talk and write at the same time. Okay. I'm gonna start with concerns. I'm still concerned about the busing, where I still hear every single day, parents don't know where their children are. And I don't understand why we can't get someone to answer the phone and say, bus 42 is en route, or some parents call the only number that they have and get no answer, leave a voicemail, and I'm just gonna keep saying this until we can just put someone on the other end of the phone to say, I know where your child is. And I want to speak to the MOU, the OPSI MOU as well. So correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that we approve it, and it is pending OPSI approval. Both things have to happen. No? Someone needs to explain this to me. What happens if OPSI doesn't approve an MOU that we already voted on. It just doesn't go.
Just the same.
So
as
we
the
vote
opposite.
on it. If
If they
OPSI
approve
throws it down,
you-
or,
the board does it, it doesn't
votes
go
it
through.
down, it doesn't happen. So I don't think the order matters. If you can explain, send me an email, explain it to me better. Because no, I know that, but it doesn't matter which happens first.
The public portion is over.
Can you please just continue with your report
Yes.
without a conversation? Thank
Yes.
you.
Send me an email and explain to me, please. I supported Gamba this month by going to their Dining to Donate. Applebee's was generous enough to donate 15%, I believe, of every ticket a certain day to the Music Boosters. And so I went and participated in that, and that was good. They raised a lot of money for that. I want to talk a little bit about the OSBA Capitol Conference that I just got to attend. It was spectacular. And Mrs. Stowell's gone, which I'm sad about, but because I had the pleasure of listening to her daughter speak about her dyslexia journey, the journey between struggling and even getting diagnosed. It took them 17 professionals to even get someone to put down on paper that the poor child had dyslexia. Then the schools can start offering interventions, and then the parents can start doing things, and that just seemed ridiculous to me. But anyway, she was 11-year-old little spitfire with her red hair, and she spoke in front of a room of, 50 people, and she was just spectacular, this little girl. So articulate and really got her message across, and I feel privileged that I was in the room when she did that. I also got to hear Governor DeWine was another highlight of my conference experience, and I also got to meet Mary Steenburgen and Ted Danson, who came to do our keynote that was intended to close our conference, but the tragedy, we closed our conference early because of the bus tragedy from Tusky Valley, and that, of course, put a big damper on the conference, but I just wanted to share how much I learned, how many people I met, how much networking I got done, and how much information I got from people around the state about the same challenges that we are having, that they are having, and it felt so reaffirming to do that. So I just want to thank you for sending me, and so that's all I have.
Yeah, I just briefly wanted to mention that I attended the Thespians performance of the Radium Girls on Friday evening, and I wanted to give kudos to Ms. Christopher and the entire grouping. They did a fantastic job, and I think a lot of us are used to seeing musicals, and we're used to seeing performances based on literature, and it was nice to see a performance based on something that actually happened and was scientific. So they did a great job, and I just wanted to give them kudos. That's all I had.
Mr. Arndt?
Nothing.
Nothing?
I'm sorry, one more thing, I apologize, I forgot. I also saw Radium Girls, and the kids were spectacular. They did such a nice job on it's all dialogue. There's no action, there's no singing and dancing. They just had to stand up there and talk for 2 hours, and it was spectacular.
I also was able to attend Applebee's Dining to Donate, so that was very nice of them to donate to Gamba. I was one of the first people in the restaurant that day for lunch, and the servers were surprised when I showed them the memo, so we got it rolling, so that was good.
Good.
Because they're like, oh, we have a Dining to Donate today, so.
I think I saw you. Were you leaving? Did you see me?
I did not see you.
I thought you were leaving when we were coming,
So,
maybe, okay.
The OSBA Capitol Conference, although ended very sadly, it was a great Sunday, Monday, and half a Tuesday. Tuesday afternoon was very sad. I feel for those families. It is a horrific thing. I can't imagine what they're going through. My heart goes out to all of them, because if you really truly think about it, the last names of the students who passed are different from the last names of the teacher and the chaperones that passed. So there's a potential that there were students on that bus that their parents were in that SUV and they lost their parents too. So not only did parents lose their students, some students lost their parents and they lost their teachers, and it is just unimaginable. And I wish it was just a bad dream, because it is just horrible that they're going through that right now. So anything that we as a district can do to support them, I really truly want to do that for them, because it's just an unimaginable tragedy. So, do we have anything else? Okay. I recommend the board hold an executive session for the purpose of considering the appointment, employment, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official.
So moved. Second.
Roll call?
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon?
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes.
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
And Ms. Fisher?
Yes.